guys, welcome back to the channel. I've been thinking long and hard about this rear differential. Everything seems to be within tolerances. You know, there's not a lot of backlash, but to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know that for sure. And I was of the opinion I'll replace the bearings and the seals and stuff, you know, tidy it up a bit, throw it back in, and if it gives me problems later on down the road, I would pull it out again. But that's no fun, is it? And I'm really relying on a lot of you guys out there. Consensus is really I should go through it and make sure everything's up to tip top. What I thought, I will take this apart, take this side cover off. I don't have the fancy socket for the end here just yet, this pinion gear. I'll have to order one of those out. It's like a castle socket with 4 prongs on it, and I'll be getting one of those. But I thought, you know what, who dares wins, as they say. But no, I want to get in there and learn together with you, and if this can help someone down the road, that'd be awesome, and I'll learn along with you. And if I screw it up, then I'm going to foot the bill, aren't I? So in my last video I was stupid enough not to have gloves on. That was totally my fault, too keen to get started, I guess. And I've already cleaned off the differential, so make sure no contamination and all that good stuff. I noticed on the Facebook group, member Joe Morgan is in Florida with Pierre, and they were doing their differential. I think it was changing the gear ratios down to 327. This is a 6.3 ratio, so it's 285, I believe, the ratio on this. I think that's right. And I thought, well, I've scanned the internet looking for anything about these differentials as far as videos and tips, how to, and I'm finding very little. But the principles, from my understanding, are much the same with all of them. It's just a question of how they're shimmed and the tolerances and all that good stuff, isn't it? And there's I believe on these, a crush sleeve on the pinion. Now, I've seen that once the crush sleeve is crushed, then that's it. If you have to take it apart again because you're not within tolerances, you need a new crush sleeve. But that's okay. I mean, the crush sleeves are they're not very expensive, so I'm assuming, again, I'll ask you guys, but probably buy a few of them. There we go, it's starting to drift apart. There we go. So, got the end bearing here. He weren't wrong. Some bloke on the internet was saying, as you know, when you open a differential, it really smells, and he wasn't wrong. This stinks in here. Now, the outer race here for the ring gear bearing is set into this housing. As you can see, that's pretty obvious. Right, so now we've got it all positioned here. From memory, I'm going to check my book and find, yeah, look, there's the ratio on there. And it says 282. So we've got 00041.5 282. So anyway, right, it's a few days later. I've had a chat with a few people, namely Duke. Thanks again, Duke. What we have is obviously we removed the slip joint that came out of this carrier. Okay, this carrier, and then there's the splines of the slip joint. That's just a simple circlip, and then you pull the slip joint out of there. Okay, so this guy is bolted in to the side here, okay, that goes into the ring gear, which I'll show you in a sec. And way down there is a 17mm bolt. I just put an extension on it and an air ratchet, and on its lowest setting, just so I don't shock anything too much. And these apparently can be a bit of a devil to slide out, but this slid straight out. So Duke was talking to me, he had to rig up something to pull his out on occasion. But I got lucky. It came out of the splines very easily. There's a bushing here in the center, Pull that guy off a sec, just so you can see all the inner workings of it, this joint. And there's a bearing there, so it flexes like that, and big ball bearings inside there. I'm not sure what kind of joint that is. It's kind of a universal joint, I guess you'd call it. So it pivots all the way around. There's no play whatsoever. It feels really pretty good to me. So that guy comes out, right? 17mm bolt. Keep it all in a plastic bag so we don't get any contamination in that guy. Let me show you the ring gear setup. And these are the outer bearings. Outer bearings here. This is what you see. Just sits in the casing like that. Here's the outer bearings. And this is where we bolted through. And then you can see the spider gears inside there. Now, again, speaking to Duke, he's a very experienced guy and has done many of these over the years. I mean, 40 or 50 of them, I think he said he'd done. What he did recommend was to me to replace the bearings on the pinion gear, because he, you know, from my understanding, what he was saying, it's picking up all the lower sludge and everything in the oil there. So if that doesn't get changed regularly, they can suffer much worse than the bearings on the rig gear. So, erring on the side of caution, I'm going to follow what someone has told me who's been doing it all his life. So we're going to leave the ring gear bearings just as they are. I had a close inspection of all the teeth. They look kind of perfect to me. I don't see any problems with those, no chips or anything, or no damage whatsoever. So I'm erring on the side of caution with this and setting that aside. So we're not making any adjustments on that. Here's the casing. Now I've given it a bit of a clean out with some brake cleaner. See, it's got a kind of a coating, a green coating on the inside here. All looks pretty clean. And to me, I'm rotating this pinion gear and that feels to me a little notchy. And it feels a little stiff. I know there is a rotational torque setting on the pinion gear, which I'm going to have to look up, but it feels a little notchy to me. And obviously there's a outer set of bearings and an inner set that are going to need replacing. And also inside there is a crush sleeve. And that obviously gets crushed down under torque to give a preload to the bearings to hold that preload. Now, what I'm going to have to do, as I say, I've got to get a special socket that will go into those castle. It's a castle socket. So these 4 notches here, and there's like a little clip here that's been peened over. So we've got to knock that out of the way and get the special socket on there. And Duke was saying to me, and it makes total sense, that they have a tendency to ride out, you know, and you can end up damaging this nut and be in trouble. So a lot of palm pressure, you know, so this will be clamped to my big bench down in the shop. I'll get this all clamped down so I can get some pressure on that, and then we're going to have to lock this flange out so it doesn't spin. I'll figure a way of locking that out so we can take this flange off, take the nut off, and then I'm assuming behind that is the pinion seal, and then we should be able to knock this pinion gear straight out. Yeah, also we've got the fill plug here and the drain plug here, and what I might do is invest in one of those magnetic drain plugs, so it attracts any small particles of metal to the magnet, and then obviously when you change your oils you can clean the magnet off. It makes complete sense to me. And once I've got this pinion gear out, which is going to be a little while because I've got to order the tool, and that'll probably be a few weeks or a week or so, I'm going to clean all this case up, clean all the shafts up, get all those cleaned and repainted. So you might as well, because then it's right there, it's not going to be like this again, and make it presentable, and then we can start reassembling again. I finally got my Clark Castle socket that we've been waiting for, the special socket to remove this special nut here. Before we do that, we have to mark the flange in conjunction with the pinion shaft so it orientates back the same way it came out. Now I'm assuming that's for balance. I'm not sure any other reason why to do that. What I've noticed also on this, someone's been in here before, I think, because some of these nut holes, these bolt holes, are kind of being elongated as though they've been stressed. I think maybe for when someone locked this out and they were tightening the crush sleeve in there, which requires quite a bit of torque apparently to overcome that crush and get it to the right setting. But anyway, so like I say, we're going to make a little mark. You can use a punch, but I don't think it's any good, this punch. So what I'm going to do is put a little mark with my grinding wheel here, and yeah, that should work. So just a little line there. Right, straight across, so the flange can go back in the same orientation. Like I say, I'm assuming for balance purposes, but that's what it says in the manual, so that's what we're doing. You may have noticed some improved lighting in the workshop. I've had these lights kicking around for a while and I haven't got around to using them. I thought I'm going to do that today. So, right, now obviously we've got to knock this. Again, this is another reason why I think someone's been in. They haven't put this this little circlip that's supposed to be pinned into the little castle slots here very well. You can see where I put my mark here and here, but see there's a thin piece of metal there that's supposed to be pinned into here, I believe, but they haven't done it. It's kind of been a messy job here. They pinned it into that notch and a little bit in there, but not really in these. But anyway, we'll obviously have to buy a new one of those, so I've got to reset that, you know, knock that back, and then we can get the socket wrench on there. So obviously when we're undoing this, we're going to have to hold this flange. Now there is a special tool from Mercedes to do that. I haven't got it, so what I came up with was, you know, those fan removal wrenches that you get. I've got one for my son's car. Now this is a fan removal holder. You know, this is supposed to go over the heads of the bolts while you undo the fan from the pulley. But this, luckily enough, look at that, that lines up perfectly with that. So what we're going to do is going to just bolt this onto there, and then that will lock the flange out on the bench hopefully. And then I'm going to use my air ratchet on very low power and really make sure that this is set in there, because Duke was telling me these have a tendency to ride out of there. So I'm going to put a lot of push on there and see if we can't break that free. So let's bolt that guy on there. Lock that in there. Then we'll set this down on the old bench here. Actually, probably this way around. Because obviously that's going to want to turn that way. Right, I've got this on the lowest setting. And I'm going to really push against that. That's pretty easy. Now apparently the pinion silk replacement can be done in the car, from my understanding. It's just a nut inside a sleeve where part of this sleeve gets knocked into the castle and a part of it goes into the flange, and then that locks that. That's pretty logical. So obviously we're going to need a new one of that, so that nut comes out there. Right, I'll just undo this guy. As I say, I've never done this before, so once I pull this out, I don't want the pinion shaft to drop and damage the teeth. So what I think I will do, just hold on to that guy and pull this flange off. Hopefully this will work alright. enough. Now this, I've obviously got to be careful. I'll probably put that nut back on that and just give that a gentle tap with some with the rubber mallet, so obviously you don't want to damage this thread, and then at the same time I'll hold it on the other side. And there is the seal. Let me get you in close, because some of you guys might be doing this job on the car, and from my understanding you have to check this this running edge here that rides inside that seal. So this is the running edge for the seal, and there's all the splines there, you see. So, and there's my mark. This is what I was saying, there's a slight deformation of that hole there. Maybe that's somewhere where he clamped off to tighten up when he put it back, because someone's definitely been in here. Splines seem okay. Right, okay, so we're all right in close here. I'm so glad I got that new lighting, it's making all the difference. So sorry guys, I didn't do that before. So anyway, so there is the seal running here. This is the holder, I'm assuming, of the seal, and that really does not look like that shifted for a very long time. So yeah, there it is. So that's obviously got to come out and be replaced. There's our mark on the shaft to orientate the flange and back in the correct position again. So what I'm going to do now is put the nut back on there, like that, to protect the threads. Because these are tapered roller bearings, obviously one going in this way, one going in this way, and we should be able to give that a tap and knock this pinion gear out. So let's see what we get. Maybe I need a heavier hammer. So, the mallet's not heavy enough, I don't think, so I packed the rear here with a towel so the pinion doesn't come flying out and damage itself. And we've got a little bit more of a weightier mallet here. We'll give these a few wraps. Try the old end grain. I think that got it. That's it. That definitely loosened it up. So that's knocking that outer bearing off of the shaft. Okay. So we'll just carry on with the making sure that gear is protected on the other side, where the bearing on the outside is not free yet, but the gears are getting very close to the inner casing. So see, I don't want those smashing up against there. So what I'm going to do, set some cardboard between the gear and the casing so it will ride up on the cardboard. So effectively that, you can see that I obviously don't want these teeth to smash against the casing work. But anyway, let's see how that goes. That's it, that's working nice actually. There's the famous crush sleeve here to make sure that the preload on the taper roller bearings is correct. I'll talk to you that in a minute. Let me get this outer frame off, and then we should be able to get the other bearing out of there. So let me take that off. This is a 13mm bolts. Obviously the carrier for the pinion seal, so you can see that this would be a completely doable job inside the car. Man, there's that rank smell again. Anyway, so then you can take that to the bench, get that all taken out, punched out, reset, boom, straight back. And there is the outer race, the tapering roller bearings here. Okay, now when they were in the car, you see, in the unit, I felt a little notchiness. So what I'm going to do is clean these up and feel it, and I'm obviously going to replace them. But Duke was saying that these bearings logically are getting a lot of the lower sludge, and if you don't change the oil regularly, it's a vulnerable area. That sludge is getting built up at the bottom, and they're liable to get kind of crappy oil, I'm assuming. So another reason to change your oil regularly, and another reason to get one of those magnetic drain plugs to pull all the crap to that. So it's a really good idea. So here is the outer race here that obviously will need pushing in a new race when we get new bearings in there. So yeah, you can see a little channel there. I'm assuming the oil then can splush up here and get onto this outer bearing. That's what I'm assuming that hole is for. Now I'm making an assumption here, but do you see here, right there, there's a channel that has been ground out. Now I'm wondering whether that is on the same of all cars, or is it ground out specifically for the 6.3. I have no idea. Let me know about that, because that's interesting. That's milled out there to allow those teeth to not hit. We touched upon the ring gear. Okay, so those of you who know the ring gear, it has to be orientated one way or another for the correct backlash, contact patch, all that stuff, to get a good teeth pattern, contact pattern on the pinion to the ring gear. Now there's an adjustment, and various other cars use shims and what have you. Now this does use a shim system, but on this side there is a ring down here. So see that castle ring there? There's a ring, and there's various numbers all around there, and there's a lock latch down at the bottom, 2 bolts and a locking pin that locks that. Now that ring, as you turn it one way or another, orientates the bearing in or out, and that's the adjustment, you see. And then obviously any adjustment you make this side, you have to do the corresponding adjustment on the other side, meaning adding or taking away a spacer ring. And the rings come in all different thicknesses, thousandths of an inch, you know. So I have not done that before, but that's pretty logical the way that is adjusted. We're not changing the ring gear bearing, so we shouldn't have to, I thought I'd do it, we shouldn't have to make any adjustments to that, so I'm going to leave that just as it is. All we're dealing with is the pinion gear bearings. Give this a thorough cleaning, brake cleaner, make sure we can see what we got here. Right, now we cleaned all those up, I just want to give you a little overview here. Right, obviously this is the main pinion. We got the inner tapered roller bearing here. That's on this sleeve here, that gets pressed on. There is a crush sleeve here that gets set on there, and then this bearing goes on, and then that, obviously you get the flange on, the flange goes on, right? So this goes on with the seal running along this edge here, okay? And then obviously the nut. Now, where we get the, we got a few things going on. Obviously, when you take this off, you're always supposed to replace these crush sleeves, because essentially it's like got a memory, isn't it? So you go pushing that back on again and tightening up to the torque. It's lost its preload, so to speak, and so you need to get a new crush sleeve. Now, I have spoken to Duke, and he talked about what he and it makes complete sense, because essentially you've got to get the preload correct on these taper bearings, loading them to the point where they're not overloaded, where they would just burn up and cook themselves to death. And if they didn't have enough preload, depending on whether you're accelerating or decelerating, the pinion wants to do this business, doesn't it? So if there's any play like this, you could, extreme examples, get clunking, as you're decelerating and accelerating. So these, because they're tapering, wedge shape, they have to be preloaded. And this crush sleeve, when you buy the crush sleeve, it has to be loaded to a certain torque setting where it crushes it to the point where it holds that pressure, so to speak. Makes complete sense. But what Duke was saying, he does use the old crush sleeve and then adds a shim on the crush sleeve, essentially making this effectively a little wider, so preloading the unit again. Now, he said some people would poo-poo that, but essentially I can't see why that wouldn't work. We're probably not going to do that just because I want to do it the by the book way, just so people are happy with that, you know, because they're going to want to see how you're supposed to do it. But I think putting an extra sleeving there to bring back the preload is perfectly fine, really. But I'll probably get comments to the contrary. Oh, look at that. Must have been an Englishman. Made in England. Timken, made in England. Oh, I didn't know that. So, I'm assuming these were done at one point, otherwise I'm assuming these would have been German. But they're English bearings. But still Timken, obviously. Now, also Duke said, make sure you get good quality bearings. Timken, but proper ones, you know, made, I believe, in USA or Japan or apparently England. But avoid the cheaper alternatives, you know. These not cheap bearings, but it's not expensive enough to warrant buying the cheapo ones, is it? With all this work that you go to get in here, you want to invest in good bearings. That makes complete sense, because all the money and time and labour, you don't want them to go back in again, do you? So anyway, so that I think is going to be all for today, because I've got questions to ask Duke about reassembly. Now, when we pull this bearing off, I do believe there's going to be some spacer rings between this and the pinion, because not only do we have to have a correct preload on these bearings, we have to have the correct distance where this is called the, there's a technical name for it, pinion depth. You know, the depth of this pinion as it corresponds to the ring gear. If it's, let me go and get the ring gear and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so forget that paste for the moment, because I was doing some experiments with the gearing paste and everything before I disassembled, but we'll get back to that in a minute. So obviously the pinion sits like this, doesn't it, right? So the pinion depth is the relationship of this across the center line of the ring gear. Now, depending on the depth, you essentially want to make sure that this contact patch between the two gears is central in the patch. You don't want it too much on what I think is called the heel or the toe, and that's where this gearing paste comes in. Okay, we're going to have to approach that later on, because from my understanding, and I can't think of any way else to do it, is this all needs reassembly. Okay, you're going to have to put a shaft in here. You're going to have to put some load on it so it pressurizes these gears against each other to get a good reading on the gear paste, you see. And that will tell you whether we're too much on the heel or the, I think that's the heel, and this is, or that's the toe and that's the heel. Anyway, one way or another, it's got to be in the center of those teeth to be a good, good contact. Then, obviously, you've got the two bearings on the ring gear that have to be centered correctly. Now, I don't think we're going to have to worry about that, because we're not touching these bearings, because they seem and appear to be perfectly fine. But this orientation needs to be adjusted, and that was that adjuster I showed you earlier on in the differential. But this is a project, as I say. I'm working with the help of experienced guys that have done this before, and hopefully you guys have learned something. I've certainly learned stuff taking this thing apart. A lot of it is actually very logical when you see it, but you have to refer to the manual, make sure you're doing it correctly. Don't take any unnecessary risks, because, you know, this stuff doesn't grow on trees, as they say. put all our parts, keep our parts together, and then start making a parts list. Obviously the bearings are the first thing, and probably some spacer sleeves, and obviously a new pinion seal to go into this carrier. And this is something I learned, you know, take that carrier off. Obviously you've got to remove the flange. Okay, so the flange comes off, that's why they say mark it. Okay, then you can remove this. But here's a question for you guys. If you do that, if you take this nut off, okay, from my understanding you've lost your preload to change out your pinion seal, because they say in the manual that you can do that. And you can't get this pinion seal out unless you take the flange out, unless you take the nut off, right? So anyway, that's a question I'm asking you guys, more experienced guys. Well, that's about it for today. I don't really want to go any further because I need to do a little bit more research in what to do next. Obviously got a little bit of ordering to do, probably buy a couple of crush sleeves actually. And I have seen certain guys saving these crush sleeves, okay, so they'll do a reassembly without the preload to check their contact patch, make sure they're all good, okay, and then when they take it apart, okay, and put their new crush sleeve back on, and then preload this, the contact patch they know is good. But that's something I'll wait to hear from you guys. Also, another thing I'm going to talk to Duke about is backlash. Now, when you go to check the backlash of a more traditional differential, this is, from my understanding, called a clamshell design. Normal rear differentials, you have the access plate on the back, don't you, that is exposing the ring gear. And that makes it very easy to check the backlash of the ring gear. That's the to-in and fro-in of the ring gear before it takes up contact and moves you along. Too much can result in a clunking noise from the rear in reverse or forward. And if there's not enough, if there's too little backlash, then it can essentially cook the gears and be whiny and all that stuff. So from my understanding, from this design, you see, you can't do that, but there are different gauges that, removing this drain plug here, it seems to me you could insert one of those gauges inside and take your reading through the drain plug on the gear. But again, that's something I'm going to be talking to Duke about. I really appreciate, I'm going to lose that, do we? Really appreciate you guys watching this and following along. And you're learning as much as I am, hopefully. Anyway, thanks all for watching, guys. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.